Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Isabel and I share Latin inspired recipes. Today we're going to start with the most requested recipe on my website, and it is the Colombian empanada. It is kind of hard to make at first, but with all the tips and tricks I'm going to be sharing with you today, hopefully your empanadas are a success from day one. We are going to start by making the dough. It is very simple, but you will need to find pre-cooked corn flour. This flour is different than the one used to make corn tortillas. The only ingredient should be corn. Then we're gonna add a teaspoon of cornstarch, a teaspoon of salt, the juice of half a lemon, so about a tablespoon of avocado oil, and we are going to use chicken bouillon. You can definitely use water, but I prefer chicken bouillon to give more flavor to my dough. After you mix all the ingredients, we are going to knead the dough by hand for about 10 minutes until we get a Play-Doh consistency. The dough should be pretty smooth, it shouldn't be lumpy, and it definitely shouldn't be too wet or too dry. I like to add the chicken bouillon a little bit at a time, mix it in, and just get a filling and add a little more. I did end up using the 2 cups that the recipe calls for, so the quantities will make the perfect dough, but I like to add it a little bit at a time. After we knead the dough for about 10 minutes, we should get that Play-Doh consistency, that smooth dough, and we are going to let it rest. While the dough is resting, we are going to make the filling for our empanadas. I already have some ingredients prepped ahead of time, and I highly recommend that you do so because these empanadas take some time and are labor intensive. So if you can make some steps ahead of time, it is going to be to your advantage. Also, when we make the filling, it is important to let it cool down so the empanadas do not crack when we are frying them. You can make ahead your meat, your potatoes, and the sofrito that goes with the meat and potatoes. But here I'm going to show you how I made the sofrito and then mix it with the potatoes and the beef. Okay, our dough is coming together, and I'm going just to make it into a bowl and wrap it in plastic paper, and I let it rest for about 10 minutes or so as I made the sofrito, and I didn't put it in the fridge or anything. It can be at room temperature, but it needs to be covered so it doesn't dry out, because if it dries out, you're going to need to adjust a little bit of water or chicken bouillon, and we don't want to do that because it's hard to get the dough right. As the dough is resting, I'm making my sofrito, or guiso as we call it in Colombia, and it has Roma tomatoes, it has onion, it has garlic, and tomato paste, Dijon mustard, garlic, and red peppers. I use smoked red peppers. I just love that smoky flavor and that extra layer of flavor to my empanadas. And I chopped everything pretty roughly. I don't mind big chunks of tomato or onion in my empanadas. I think it adds texture and a different mouthfeel, but feel free to do a smaller dice if you don't like these big veggies. Everything goes in a frying pan until everything is nice and aromatic and you form kind of like a tomato paste. This is gonna act as kind of like a binder for our meat and our potatoes to keep it in the empanada. We don't want it too wet or too dry. It's just like a nice little touch of freshness to the meat and potatoes, and as I said, it binds everything together. sofrito is ready, we are going to add it to the meat and potatoes. For the potatoes, I like to leave them a little chunky. I mash them, but I leave some texture because I like little chunks of potato in my empanadas. Then we add the ground beef. There are many techniques to do the beef. I personally love to cook a piece of meat and then grind the beef in a food processor. But you can definitely store both ground beef. It's just a matter of preference. I feel like you can control more the flavor and the texture, but any kind of beef that you want to use works here. You can also use a combination of pork and beef. There are empanadas that are made with chicken, with tuna. The filling is truly optional, up to you how you want your empanadas. This is the classic Colombian empanada, but there are many versions of this depending on the region that they are from. Now we are going to start making our empanada disc, and you can use either a plate or something like a flat surface to flatten them. I'm gonna show you here how I did it with just a cutting board, and then how I did it with a tortilla press, which is my preferred method. You're gonna make them about a quarter-inch thick. They shouldn't be too thick because they will be kind of raw when you fry them, but they shouldn't be too thin either, because they tend to break when you fry them. I add about a tablespoon of the filling in one side and then close the empanada disc on the other side. Parchment paper, film paper, plastic wrap, anything you have to prevent the dough from sticking, it's helpful, and it's going to be the key to forming the empanada without breaking and making a thin enough empanada that is crispy when you fry it. So you can see how I use the parchment paper to close it, and repeat the operation. Add the filling and then use another piece of parchment paper to close the empanada and seal the edges. And I'm going to show you how to seal those edges and make a little crimple on the empanada that is characteristic of the Colombian empanada. You want to keep them filled but not overfilled, or it's gonna be impossible to close them. I say about a tablespoon is a pretty good measure, and as far as the size of the dough, I'm using a golf size bowl as my reference. And then you can see how I make sure the edges are completely closed, and then I make this little kind of like crimple that we make in Colombia with the empanadas, that is just like a cute little touch, but you could definitely leave them just plain like this, but I think that looks pretty cute, and it crisp up really nice, so it's like a really nice mouthfeel when you fry them. As far as the oil, I like to use a small pot with about 2 cups of oil. I'm using avocado oil, and I am making sure my oil stays between 325 and 350 Fahrenheit. And to make sure my oil is ready to fry the empanadas, I just throw a little bit of masa in there and it starts bubbling. That means my oil is ready. I put 2 empanadas at a time. I know it's not the most efficient thing, but if you don't, you're gonna need a lot of oil, and I don't want to waste a lot of oil. So I rather fry them in small batches. The frying time is about 3 to 4 minutes. It doesn't take long. Everything is cooked. We just want that shell, that outer shell, to be extra crispy and golden and beautiful. But other than that, everything is cooked. So I don't like using like a big pot of oil. Of course, if you have a large, amount of people, by all means, make them in one batch, but don't overcrowd the pan because then your oil is gonna get cold. You can see they are super crispy, they are meaty, they are just such a good food. And I really love the ají sauce. That's my favorite. I hope this video helped you and inspired you to make these empanadas. The full recipe is linked in the description.